Oh, hey guys, I didn't see you there. I was over there busy watching that epic intro video. Anyways, this is your host, the Funky Genius, and I would like to welcome you to Let's Play Final Fantasy VI. And I'm sure you will quickly notice that there are two screens.
On the left side, released in 2007 for the Nintendo Game Boy Advance, Final Fantasy VI Advance. And on the right side, released in 1994 for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Final Fantasy III. Only in America.
When I was trying to think of which version of Final Fantasy VI I really wanted to Let's Play, I was having trouble deciding if I was going to play the Super Nintendo version or the Game Boy Advance version. So what I decided on is it would be better if I would just play both versions at the same time until I can make up my mind. So this is a good opportunity for you as the viewer to see some of the differences between the two versions. So in this pilot episode, I'm going to showcase both games while I jump back and forth between the music from each version. So like to be able to tell which one is playing, just look at the two screens. One will be lighter and one will be darker. So the darker one will be muted and the lighter one will have the music playing. For now, just sit back and enjoy my first episode of Let's Play Final Fantasy VI. Long ago, the War of the Magi reduced the world to a scorched wasteland, and magic simply ceased to exist. 1,000 years have passed. Iron, gunpowder, and steam engines have been rediscovered, and high technology reigns. But there are some who would enslave the world by reviving the dead destructive force, known as magic. Can it be that those in power are on the verge of repeating a senseless and deadly mistake? So, as you will see in this opening scene here, the qualities and the colors are slightly different. The Super Nintendo version has slightly darker colors, and the Game Boy Advance version is slightly lighter colors. Now I know it's going to be hard to kind of tell that because of my dark screen, light screen differences, but trust me, the GBA version is much brighter in color palette. Another big difference you will notice right away is that one of these soldiers' names is Vix, and on the other side his name is Biggs. But Wedge is the same on both games. Now, the translation for Final Fantasy III on the Super Nintendo is very much different than the much later translation of Final Fantasy VI on the Game Boy Advance. It is the Final Fantasy VI Advance version actually is more closer to the real translation of the Japanese version. So I'm gonna go ahead and sit back and let you guys listen to the cool music on this next part, and I'll just kind of jump back and forth between the music so you can see the differences. Also note that the credits are different because different teams worked on each of these versions. Final Fantasy III for Super Nintendo had the original Final Fantasy producers from Squaresoft, and for 6 Advanced, Square Enix had already been formed, so there was a whole new set of developers. Every time I see this scene, I always picture Chariots of Fire. Like, that would be a perfect song to go with this part, wouldn't it? See what I mean? It would go perfectly with this part, right? Like, I can't picture any other song that would sound as good as this one. Well, I mean, besides this one. Another big thing you're going to notice here in a second is that each of these versions, this specific scene is a different length of time. Because I started them identical times, even though the timing was different on the scene before this. I made sure I lined these two parts of the scene up so they were identical, and yet the Super Nintendo version still finishes first. So that just, I guess, means the credits are one person shorter, or maybe the song is shorter. I'm not exactly sure what accounts for the difference. I didn't look into it too closely. So, as usual, you start off in the city of Narshe, and you'll first notice right away the colors, like I said, are in the Game Boy Advance version, are much brighter. You'll also notice that I'm slightly behind in my playthrough on the Game Boy Advance, and that's only strictly because I took longer to read the dialogue. But you'll quickly see that the Game Boy Advance version is much faster in general than the Final Fantasy III version on the Super Nintendo. And that's mostly due to just the battling and load times are just much faster on the Game Boy Advance version. And I think that just is due to the fact that it's the exact same quality as the Super Nintendo version, and by that I just mean in graphics. So the Game Boy Advance is more powerful than the Super Nintendo, so in a sense it could process the graphics and everything and the music and all that faster and load things much faster than the Super Nintendo did. So I think that's what accounts for the Game Boy Advance version being faster. You'll also notice, as I switch back and forth between the music, that the music in the Super Nintendo version is very, very good. It's actually better than the Game Boy Advance version in my opinion. It's more smooth, it's more pleasing to the ear. The Game Boy Advance version, you can clearly tell that like the sound is coming from a handheld device, so it just has that ringtone quality, like it's a song you would hear playing from your phone. While the Super Nintendo version, you could actually clearly hear the orchestral, just how orchestrated the songs are. They're so much more beautiful in the Super Nintendo version, in my opinion. I mean, just listen to the battle theme differences. You also notice that our main character, she starts at the bottom of your battle party, and in the Game Boy Advance version, she starts at the top of the party, like in the order that she's standing in the party. That's all I'm pointing out right here. And I thought that was kind of odd. I didn't understand why she was at the bottom in the Super Nintendo version and why she's at the top in the Game Boy version. It just seemed like a weird, small difference. And I don't know, it doesn't really affect anything. It was just a weird thing I noticed. But what it does is it affects who is walking around on the world map in these parts. Like right now on the Super Nintendo version, if you look, Terra is the person you're controlling, but when you get to this screen, now you're controlling the Shinra soldiers, and it's like, what? Why is there a Shinra soldier as my... And I'm calling him a Shinra soldier because this is totally Final Fantasy VII. No, there's a soldier. Wrong game, dude. Wrong game. But if you noticed down on the world map, the soldier was actually the sprite that was walking around on the map as I went from one screen to the next. It was really weird when I noticed that. I was like, why is that happening? I don't know. It's so weird. Very, very weird. And like I said, as you can see, the Game Boy Advance version is very much ahead of the Super Nintendo version. Now, I'm not saying that the Game Boy Advance version is light years faster than the Super Nintendo version, but what I'm saying is it's slightly faster, and it's mostly just the battling that's faster. Just clicking through battles is faster, and the wait times between attacks is faster. And just faster in general. Small, faster things. Smoother animation, if anything. And I could have sworn that the Game Boy Advance version, you could run right away at the beginning of the game. You didn't need to wait till later when you actually get a specific item that helps you run. But I guess the only way you can run is in the PlayStation 1 version of this game. Now, I know I might have said at some point that I was going to play the PlayStation version of this game as my Let's Play, but I have reasons that will stay unknown for now that I'm not going to play that version. I will probably be stating those when I get more into the game, and I'll go ahead and maybe even next episode I'll go ahead and say why. But for now I'm going to leave that out of it because we're actually almost done with this opening episode. The last thing I did right here is I tried to show the differences in the menus. The menus really aren't that different. Clearly there's only, well, I haven't gotten to the Super Nintendo version here. Okay, here we go. Now we can see both menus side by side here. The only real differences are the font is a little bit smaller in the GBA version, and one big difference I see already is in the Super Nintendo version they're called tonics, and then in the Game Boy Advance version they're back to being called potions like you normally would expect. So you can see the weird translations they had, the translation differences they had. It's not really that it was the translation was weird, it's just the differences in how the translators changed it from the Japanese version to the American version. It's very weird. So I'm thinking that that's pretty much the wrap of this first pilot episode of Final Fantasy VI, and I'm a little bit on the fence as to which version I'm going to play. I might know by the time I start the next episode, but we'll have to see. So for now, I'm going to leave you guys right here in the Cave of Narshe on both screens. This is the Funky G signing off. Have a great day.
Peace.
I want to thank you guys all so much for watching this first episode of Final Fantasy VI. So if you enjoyed it, just click on that next episode button and you can watch the next one. And if this was the best pilot episode you've ever seen in your entire motherfucking life, leave me a comment pledging your undying loyalty to me, and I will forever be grateful. Or, if you thought this episode sucked an entire bag of dicks, then leave me a comment about your life under that toll bridge, because I'm sure it's fascinating. Or, one last thing you could do, since most people seem to think that Final Fantasy VI is the best Final Fantasy game, you could just leave me a comment telling me which Final Fantasy game you think is best, and why. Let the trolling commence!